Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here to talk about some of the books that I have read in my reading lifetime that I would probably class as some of the worst books that I have ever read. And obviously this is just my opinion, so if you guys love these books, that is absolutely no problem. These are just for me not my kind of books anymore. The first book I want to talk about is more of a book series, and this is House of Night by PC Cast, I think is the author's name. Now I haven't actually read anything by PC Cast in a long time, though I do think she's still publishing books, and on the flip side there are some series of PC Cast that I've read that I've really enjoyed, and when I originally was reading House of Night, it was when I was a teenager and I used to use like kind of the pocket money that I did get, I would actually use on the first few books in her House of Night series, where we follow a young girl called Zoe who ends up going to this kind of magical school where she ends up having kind of like these witchy powers, and it turns out that she is almost, I don't know whether she's the descendant or kind of the living embodiment of this goddess, and she ends up being kind of bestowed these powers by this goddess. And we see her go through loads of different like trials and tribulations when it comes to just like magical beings, fighting enemies, as well as just like more teenage stuff, angst, friendship, bullying, romantic relationships, love triangles. It's all there. When you think about an early like YA book at the time that was kind of at the time of like Twilight was pretty popular at the time, or was Twilight even popular at the time when I was reading this? I'm not sure, but it was kind of that era. And when I first read this, I really enjoyed the first couple of books. I just thought they were like everything I wanted in a book. There was like the angst, there was the, you know, the cool teenage boy that was into Zoe. She was just this ordinary girl who suddenly was thrust into this life of, you know, having these powers. And then I think I took a little bit of a break from the books, and then I eventually came back and started reading more of them. And it kind of felt like there was a plan for the first few books, and the author kind of knew where she wanted to go, and then they became kind of popular and she just kept dragging out the series, and as soon as I thought one book was going to be the end, the next book would be the end, and then there would be another book, and it just became never ending, and the characters just started to, it kind of feels like, you know, like the Vampire Diaries, when they all start dying and then coming back to life, and then all these like weird things start happening, and it's like really kind of just really strung out, and you did feel like that series really needed to end like 4 seasons before it actually did end. It kind of feels like that, and a little bit like Grey's Anatomy as well. Like that definitely should have ended like season 10, but we won't talk about that here. But it kind of felt like that, like the author just didn't know where to stop. And then the more I read it, the more I realised kind of how basic the writing was. Now for my young like teenage reading self, I didn't really see the problems with the writing. Then when I got a bit older, I realised how bad the writing was, just in terms of like how the characters were portrayed. The characters became very, you know, goody two-shoes. They became a little bit, you know, self-righteous in many ways as the books went on. And then one of my main gripes about the book was the fact that the main character would never actually curse properly. So when she got really angry at stuff, where she was calling out people for like doing bad things, she would use the word bull poopy instead of bullshit, and that actually used to just grind my gears so much. I used to hate reading that when she used to say bull poopy, because yeah, it just made me rage so much. So yeah, I would now class this as probably one of the worst book series I've ever read. I would actually, out of fun, like probably reread these again someday, kind of remind myself of some of the characters and the storylines, because, you know, there were some that I did enjoy, but overall just not the best series. The next book I'm going to talk about is actually The Time Traveler's Wife, and this one might be a little bit controversial because this is obviously a very well loved book. Like, you know, it's become a movie, and now I think there's like a TV series that's come out about it as well. When I read the book, I just could not get past like the weird age differences at different times in the book. So you're following this man called Henry who is able to time travel, and he doesn't actually have any control over his time travel either, and we never really find out why he time travels. I think it's just something that's like passed through his genes or something, and we never find out why it's happening to him. But you know, he could be there 1 minute and then the next he's not there, and he shows up completely naked in some other time. He might be there for a few minutes and then he's brought back into the time he had left. Well, I think it opens up the first time Henry time travels to the woman who's going to become his wife, but at the time she is still really young. She's only like 9 or 10, I think, and that's the first time that she meets him. And then as she grows up, she starts seeing him more and more. He starts, like, you know, every time he time travels, he ends up coming back to her, and they obviously end up building a relationship from the time that she is quite young, and he kind of tells her, like, I think pretty early on, that she is the woman that like that he's going to marry, that she will become his wife and that they will fall in love, and you know, that the age gap between them isn't as large as it actually seems. It's just the fact that he's traveling back. But I just had a real problem with that, the fact that like this girl, the whole time that she was growing up, she kept being told by him that he was the man that she was going to end up with, and it kind of felt like she was, you know, she never really was allowed almost to, she never got the freedom really to make her own decisions in that, right? Like she always knew that because he was coming from the future, that was always going to be the plan, that was always going to be the way it was laid out. So I always had a bit of a problem with that. Now I do think this book, like, I think there's like two ways people kind of interpret this book. It's like there's that like sweet romantic kind of tragic love story that is in it that some people really, really love, and then there's the other side that are like, there's a little bit of grooming, and I just kind of fall on like the grooming side, where I just felt really uncomfortable for a lot of that book, and how Henry, it felt like he was grooming Claire, I think maybe was his wife's name. And yeah, it just, yeah, I definitely felt just a little bit iffy and a little bit off about the whole thing, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. So yeah, that is why it's on this list. Next book is from a series that I actually really enjoyed reading, and I've actually talked a lot about this book in the past year because yeah, I've been kind of ranting and raving about this book because I'm still not over it and I will never get over it. And that is Skin Privilege by Karen Slaughter. So this is the last book in her Grant County series, which is, it's 8 or 9 books I think. So like there's a good few books that like you're reading in the series and you become very invested in it. It is a very, very dark thriller crime series where you're following two characters. We're following Jeffrey, who is a police chief in this kind of a town in, I think it's Atlanta. And then we are also following Sarah, who is kind of she's like the local town kind of doctor, pediatrician, and she is also the county coroner, or like not the county coroner but like the town coroner. She's the one that obviously, so her and Jeffrey end up teaming up a lot, like in terms for like murder mysteries, and to try and solve different murders. They end up coming together and they have a relationship. A lot of this book, Jeffrey and Sarah end up in this like will they won't they relationship. They were actually previously married and because of some reasons they ended up divorcing, but the love kind of between them and the chemistry never really went away. So they have this kind of will they won't they relationship, and you become really, really invested in their relationship and the two of them as characters. And the entire book series, like they're the two central characters and their relationship is really central throughout the entire series. So when I say that in the last couple of pages of Skin Privilege, like literally the last couple of pages, Karen Slaughter literally gets a grenade, takes the pin out and kind of just like throws it at the reader, and everything implodes at the very end of that book, of the very end of that series, and leaves complete devastation in its wake. Like that is actually an understatement. The only reason I didn't throw this book across the room was because I was reading it on my phone. If I didn't have it on my phone, that thing would have been across the room. I never would have wanted to pick it up again. Yeah, so, but then I do really enjoy Karen Slaughter's writing in general and like her stories, and even though they're very, very dark and twisty. And Grant County, there is a spin-off series that is the Will Trent series, and Sarah does become, I think, a character later on in that series as well. So I am currently on, I think, book 3 in the Will Trent series. Is my next book to read, so I am reading that to eventually see how Sarah like is and ends up in that series, and see what has happened and what is the fallout of what happened at the end of Skin Privilege. But yeah, definitely when I think about just the books that like really made me angry, this is a book that made me angry because I just couldn't believe it, and I will never forgive her for what she did. Another book that I have on this is actually a really surprising one when people think about like what I love, what I like to read, and when you think of like books on like book ideas and book synopses on paper, like this thing should be my book, like it should be like my match on paper, and that is The Art of Racing in the Rain, which is a book completely told through a dog's point of view, and about his life with its owner, and yeah, his bond and his love for his owner. And that is everything that I should want. I really, really love books like A Dog's Journey by W. Bruce Cameron. They are some of my favourites, and I just really, really love reading books about dogs told by dogs in their own words. But The Art of the Racing in the Rain just had it in a complete way that just completely turned me off the story. I just really, really didn't like it. We're following this dog as he lives with his owner. His owner, I think, is like a race car driver or something along that. And we follow him as his owner kind of meets a woman and then starts a family, and things that happen, and like bad things that happen then, and the dog is always there for his owner through like all the like the highs and the lows of his life, and he's just like this constant companion, which is great. And then one of the things I really hated about this book was the voice of the dog. When I think of dogs and I think of like what a voice of a dog would be, having dogs my entire life, loving dogs, being a complete dog person, I think of dogs being really innocent souls, being kind of goofy and happy and loving and just really, really pure. Like they are just pure souls, completely untainted by things like jealousy and lust and like badness and things like that. Like I just don't think dogs have that in them. And then the way that the dog talked about in this, the way he talked about things in this book were just so like weird, and like they felt really like just like this creepy voice, like, and he was talking about things like he'd make observations about like what his owners were like doing in bed and like talking about them mating and things like that. And I just really didn't like that, and I think he actually cursed as well in this book too, and I really didn't like that either. I was like, no, like a dog wouldn't curse. So yeah, I just really really like just turned me off the entire book. I really didn't like it. Also, this like, it's kind of like a false sexual assault charge is like a main plot point in this book as well, and that whole thing just felt like very like ugh, as well. I didn't really like that either. So yeah, there was just a couple of things in this book, but the main reason was the dog's voice just didn't feel very dog authentic to me. And then the last book I want to talk about for this list is The 100 Lies of Lizzie Lovett. Now this is a really funny one because I like was giving out about this book when I originally read it, and then my friend over Kirsty's Reviews, she read it and she absolutely loved it. So for this was like a 1 or 2 star for me. It ended up being like a 5-star read for her. I have the noisiest toys when I'm doing this. Okay, I'll keep this. Okay, thank you. The 100 Lies of Lizzie Lovett is kind of this YA, it's kind of like a contemporary mystery like book following this young girl who I feel like she might be a little bit of a misfit. She maybe doesn't fit so well into her school, and then this girl who I don't know whether it's in her year is a little bit older than her, called Lizzie Lovett, ends up disappearing. And for some weird reason our main character decides she's going to find out what happened to Lizzie Lovett, and she starts like looking into Lizzie Lovett's life, and for no reason, like she has no actual proof really of like why she goes to this conclusion for a book that is contemporary, not a supernatural book. She decides that Lizzie Lovett is a werewolf, and that is why she's disappeared, which is just like batshit crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And when that kind of came about in the book, I was like, what the hell, like where is this book going, that this is this girl's like this is where she's going, this is what she wants to try and prove. And then it turns out in the book as well that Lizzie had a boyfriend. I think she was like 17, I think she was 17, and then she has a boyfriend who was like 23 or 24. So even that is like weird. Like if you're a 24-year-old man, you do not need to be dating a 17-year-old. Like get a life, don't be a creep. But then he ends up having kind of like a romantic relationship with our main character as well, who's also only 16 or 17. So he's like a repeat offender of going out with underage girls. And this was like kind of like an okay thing in the book. And I was like, no, that's gross. So yeah, and then the way it all kind of turned out about like what happened to Lizzie, I just felt like it wasn't done very well when it comes to things like mental health and depression and just themes around suicide as well. It just kind of, it didn't really like, it felt a little bit like 13 Reasons Why, if you know what I mean. Like that, like they thought they were doing something kind of revolutionary maybe when it came to mental health, and it really wasn't. It was pretty bad. So yeah, I didn't really enjoy that a lot. It kind of, again, made me uncomfortable in parts, was just stupid in other parts. So yeah, those are some of the books that I would class as some of the worst books I've ever read. I would love to know if you guys have any books that you would class as the worst books, why you would class them as the worst books, whether it's a book that like really surprised you in like a terrible way, books that you just thought were poorly written, or books that you just found problematic elements with that other people maybe like don't agree with. But yeah, I would love to know. I think it's just a really interesting topic to kind of explore, and yeah. So thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.